Good morning. So grateful to be here. Good morning to you online. And I know our board president is off in California, so sending you a shout out, Thomas. And he is with Reverend Tim today at the church in Marin. So, yeah, two beautiful brothers. So I found a great line in this challenging time with the coronavirus and us wanting to stay clean and pure and also faithful. But this one minister sent out this prayer that I just loved. He says, prayer can cause an outbreak of a God-given health and accelerated recovery. Hallelujah. I meant to memorize it, but it just didn't happen. So grateful. And thank you, Samar, for doing that song, Oceans, You Make Me Brave. That's God. Yes? Yes. So we're moving more deeply into our series, Braving the Wilderness with Brene Brown. I don't have my book. Does anybody have a book? There it is. Chip's got it. So I believe if you haven't signed up, that this is the last week to join a group. We have a Zoom online group, and we have a Wednesday night group that I believe is open. So down in our Connection Central, you can buy a book, get a study guide, and join in on this beautiful book study, which is just opening my heart. So today, we are celebrating International Women's Day. Woohoo! So from astronauts to athletes, from mathematicians to artists, from authors to poets to politicians, and even clergy. Yeah? That we are just so grateful. I'm going to do a little shout out to someone. I was trying to think, who would I honor today? And I posted Maya Angelou, who's my all-time favorite, and she was reciting the poem, Phenomenal Woman. So if you're a friend of mine, and you can be my friend, just look for me on Facebook, and it's on there. But Martha Smock is who I want to sort of point out. How many of you know that name? Yeah. So all of you students out there, Unity, Martha Smock was over 35 years as a Daily Word editor of Daily Word. Started in 1944 through the late 70s. So it was sort of unusual for women to have a leadership role. And what I celebrate is that Unity is sort of the leader in that, that we started our co-founder is a woman, a man and a woman, and I happen to love that idea. I think, I saw a play with Mary Magdalene. She came back to see me, but it was in San Francisco, and it was a beautiful rendition of Jesus' relationship with Mary Magdalene. And in that rendition, they were co-teachers. And it was like, that's how it happened. I'm sure that's how it happened. In my dreams, anyway. But it was a beautiful expression. So I'm happy to be a spiritual leader as a woman as well. And proud to be part of a ministry organization that promotes women in leadership. We have two CEOs in Unity right now that are women, and so that's sort of new as well. So we can just celebrate that. So this book is just one of the most treasured books. I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she's sort of a woman who tells it like it is. Yes? Yeah. She just, decides that if she needs to use a swear word, she just does and doesn't apologize. But she's also very rich and faithful and real and authentic. And I think that's what I love about her most is her deepness, how she goes beyond the ordinary, but also how she really adheres to faith and truth. So last week we talked about true belonging. That's a spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world, and then find a sacredness both in being part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. So true belonging doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. Yes? Yeah. Yes. So we're not about fitting in. We're about standing for who we are. And I have committed to open-hearted living, which means that I have to sort of be willing to be vulnerable. I have to share with you my foibles and how I fall down and how human I have been in my life. And that's okay, because those are the people I admire, who don't stand up here and just preach principle that, of course, you should act this way. This is how easy it is. But to recognize that we are here in a human experience. We're having a human experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yes? Yes. And sometimes we, just sort of thought, well, we're human, and every now and then we have a spiritual awakening. Right? Sometimes that feels like that because what? We go to sleep. Yes? We go to sleep. So therefore the conscious awareness of our oneness isn't quite there. But the reality is we are always spirit. We are here as a spirit. We are here to find out who and what we are as a spirit. And so we are born unto and into original blessing, to come and express the divine in human form. And when we leave this beautiful armor, we just change form, yes? We just go into a different dimension that you and I on this plane, for some of us, cannot see. But it's not a death of the soul. It's a shedding of the body. And the greater our awareness is around that, the more risks we take, yes? That we're not worried about this body. That it's here to get us around conveniently in this world. And so I'm reminded that these practices that we're teaching, they're challenging. They're challenging. And it's one of the ideas that we're looking at this week is that we're trying to find our way back to one another. That with the world the way it is, we're sorting ourselves into smaller and smaller groups. We're withdrawing from the world in different and greater ways. And we're surrounding ourselves only with people who think like us, because it's more comfortable. Because I don't have to listen to someone who doesn't agree with me. So this work that we're looking at is about, there's 4 steps. This one that we're talking about today is people are hard to hate. Close up. Move in. Get closer, yes? The second one next week, Reverend Larry will be here, my beautiful partner, and he's going to share Speak Truth to BS and Be Civil. And the following week, Reverend Margie's going to offer this beautiful teaching of Hold Hands with Strangers. And the last one that I will join you with again is Strong Back, Soft Front, Wild Heart. Yes? So this is a beautiful journey into discovering our own way in the world, of coming back to one another. So the remainder of this book is we're going to look at how we can reclaim our human connection. That true belonging in the midst of this world is precious. And we want to find our way back to one another. And it's going to require, though, that we become vulnerable, that we become willing to choose comfort over courage. Wrong. Yeah, I thought you'd say, wait. That we're here to choose courage, yes? Over comfort. Because it's been our tendency to choose comfort over being courageous. And so it's just a question for ourselves, not to beat ourselves up, but is to ask, so am I deciding not to go to this event or meet with this person or have this conversation? Am I choosing comfort over courageousness? It's just a question. So we are here to become vulnerable and willing to choose that and to get through this wilderness experience. And even better, to become the wilderness, to become this wild part of life. Brene Brown says the wilderness is this untamed, unpredictable place of solitude and searching. It's a place as dangerous as it is breathtaking. It's a place sought after as it is feared. But this wilderness is sort of unknown, yes? So it's a matter of having the courage to move into those places where we don't know how. Whew, boy, I could tell you a lot about that. Being in ministry, I would show up at a ministry and I never know what I'm going to be walking into. And all of the things I learned the last time don't necessarily work, right? So one of the things that happened, I think I've shared with you many stories, but Larry and I went to ministerial school. He became an ordained minister, and I was a licensed teacher. And when we got to our first ministry, I mentioned in a story that I did not have a job. I would just, knew that God was guiding us, and I showed up, and that was a different story. So we were at that first ministry, and I got into the administrative role to enter into field licensing program so I could become ordained. And I remember getting into the grind of my job. Anybody relate to the grind? Yeah. So it's just like, wow, I know I love this work, but really, I got to do that again, right? I've got to get all these administrative things, the bulletin created, the newsletter done, and, dozens and dozens of little tasks. And so it was a day that I wasn't doing very well in getting all my tasks done, that people were coming in and sort of interrupting me. That's the joke, right? So because I thought my job was administration, right? So the end of the day is probably 4:00 or after, and a woman comes in and she's distraught and upset and sad, and she's really needing support. And I wish I could tell you I just fell into my compassionate self and went, oh, darling, let me just pray with you. It was one of those eye-rolling moments of, really, my end of my day, and I haven't got everything done, and don't you know my schedule, Thank God I didn't say those words, but it was all over my face. You know what I'm saying? He's just like, all right, dear, I'll put everything down and just be here for you, right? So it was a holy moment in which I had to completely surrender over, and we got into the prayer room, and I opened myself up and, do what I do. And I said, okay, so share with me what's going on. And she went into her story, and I began to be taken over because it was a challenging story. I mean, she was still struggling with just maybe 30 to 60 days of sobriety. She was struggling with how to manage her kids. She was struggling on finding the right work. She was struggling on her relationship with her husband. I mean, it was one struggle after the other, and my heart just melted. And after some time, I fell into a space of prayer with her. And it was the most magical miracle moment that I recall, because I got out of myself. I got out of the doo-doo that we think is so important. Because, God's work is not on a list. It's in the moment, yes? Yeah. It's in the moment. That there's all these things that we need to accomplish and do and be. But God sent me that angel to remind me why I do this work. And after I had the revelation, I thanked her. And every time after that, I'm still crying because it was so beautiful. Every time after that, anytime anybody asked me for prayer, I said, oh yes, thank you. Because I need to get out of myself. Yes? And that's what prayer does. It gets us out of this world and into the connection with the divine. So that's why I can't wait to teach next Saturday's prayer class. I get to help others go to that faraway place that is 6 inches away from the head down into the heart. So God slapped me on the face to open my heart that day. Wake up, Denise. Know what your work is. I will give you the words. I will show you how to do it. It will not be on your to-do list. It's so much greater than that. Yes? It's so much greater than that. So it is our work to show up and trust that God will reveal our way. And God reveals our way in community. Whenever 2 or more are gathered, there I am in the midst of you. Yes? Yes. With the clear intention of calling that forth. And what I know is I believe in a world where we can speak words that are courageously compassionate. I believe that we can co-create that together by finding our way back to one another. Rather than yelling at each other or blaming or accusing, that we can find ourselves by showing up courageously with compassion and empathy. So I'd like to share a video today of Brené Brown, her description of what empathy is.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space where someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, huh? No. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
It's so true that when we're really coming from our hearts, that's all that's necessary. We don't even have to have the words. But don't we sort of withhold, and we know someone needs help, and we might not call or pray with them because we're so afraid we might not say the right thing, or that we need to fix them, which is the worst thing, that we need to fix them somehow. We need to give them tools to get through this challenging time. But compassion is not about that. Compassion is feeling that arises when you are confronted with the suffering of another, and you feel motivated to relieve that suffering just by your presence. Yes, you may offer to do something, but in truth, 90% of the time, just your presence is all that's needed. And compassion is a deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected to each other by something greater, something outside of us. You and I, in this room anyway, we call that God. Something rooted in love and goodness. And we also know that if we focus on the Christ presence in that person, the absolute goodness in that person, then that will come forth. And that's what prayer is for, is moving out of the human experience into the spiritual solution. It's not a human solution. Don't do this and that and this. That's not what prayer's about. It is about us coming to ourselves and recognizing that we're spiritual beings, having a human experience. So, empathy is the skill that brings about compassion to make compassion alive. We teach that on Tuesday nights for those that are interested. Compassionate communication. And it's a process taught by Marshall Rosenberg. And I love this practice. It's made me a better minister. It's made me a better leader, because I am now focused on what's going on for you beyond your story. That I no longer equate you to the victim story you might be sharing with me, but to your Christed nature, your cue card. I know who you really are, and right now, you have been triggered through life to forget who you are. That's all that's happening, yes? So it is our work as ministers, chaplains, lay leaders, to support you in your human journey, to remind you of the truth of who you are, and to bring us back into the oneness that God has us here. So empathy is about understanding someone else's perspective. Empathy is about staying out of judgment, not evaluating their circumstances and giving them all these scenarios of how they can get out of this situation that they got themselves into. It's not about judgment. It's about recognizing a feeling and need of another and communicating that. Empathy is a choice. It's always a choice. But sometimes it's a hard one because we have to first connect ourselves to what they might be feeling. And some of us think that if we connect to that feeling, we'll become it. But that's not how God works. All we have to do is connect to it so that we can have compassion for another human. We don't have to be it. We just have to know how that might be for them. That's all. One of the things we do in the face of difficulties is sometimes to try to fix people. And truthfully, what makes something better is just connection. Just connection. So, right now we're studying Marshall Rosenberg's work, and one of the chapters we looked at was expressing anger fully. What did she say? Expressing anger fully. So what we're talking about here is really looking at what's underneath our anger and recognizing that we're not upset for the reason we think. That's a Course in Miracles thing too, yes? Yeah. We're not upset for the reason we think. So the first step in expressing anger is to recognize that we want to divorce the other person from any responsibility for our anger. We want to rid ourselves of the thoughts that we're having about what they did. Because the other person is not the cause of our anger. They are the stimulus of our anger. We use language in different ways to sort of trick ourselves into believing that our feelings resulted from what people do to us. The cause of our anger lies in our thinking. The cause of our anger lies in our thinking, the thoughts of blame and judgment. So the first step in the process of fully expressing anger is to realize that what other people do is never the cause of how I feel. Whew. Really, Denise? The cause is from what we make it mean. So let's just take a simple example. You're waiting for somebody in the coffee shop to meet you for a meeting, and they're late. And you have a value that says punctuality is perfection. So you may get upset. You might get angry or perturbed. You may begin to think, they don't respect me. They don't want to be here. I'm not important enough. And we become indignant, right? So the behavior is only the stimulus for your thoughts that causes the feeling of anger. Yes? You hear that one? Because you could walk into that coffee shop and you could have spent all day with a small child, and this is the only part of the day where it's quiet and you're alone. And you're so happy. Yes? And there's this peace. And you're so grateful to be sipping this coffee all by yourself. Yes? Yes. So again, the feeling of gratitude is a stimulus for the thoughts that this is the perfect moment. And so Marshall Rosenberg, the author of that book, is working with this person in prison. And he gets this person to sort of see that people are not responsible for how we feel. That how we feel is derived from the thoughts that are created from the behaviors that we recognize. And this man sort of breaks down and says, wow, had I known this before, I probably never would have killed my best friend. So his work is so powerful to recognize where the energy comes from us. We so think it's from something out there. But the more aware and awake we become, the more emotionally intelligent we become, we begin to recognize where it comes from. I'd like to show the next slide is a spoke on a wheel. So you could see here, yes, we have this beautiful circle, and we're all in the circle, and in the center of the circle is universal needs. And as you go out to the circumference, there's behavior on the outside. So we're all trying to get peace, let's say. Let's say our universal need is peace. And we're all trying to get peace. The difference between the center of the circle and the circumference is our strategies that want us to experience peace. And then the strategies lead to behaviors. So if we're having the conversation on the outside of the circle, we're having a conversation on something outside of us. And we're circling in the story, the behavior. But if we come to the center, we come to universal needs that we all have. That is where the conversation can be. Yes? Yes. So people are hard to hate close up. Move in. Get closer. Ask, tell me more about that experience. And let go of judging the behavior, but find out what their need is. So you can have a commonality. We want, just like our faith, in the center is God, let's say. And every spoke there is a different faith tradition, right? But we're all trying to get in the experience of God in the middle. And if we're focused on the outside of the ring, our differences, then we'll be separate from one another. But if we can move in and see that we're all wanting that one unique experience of the divine, then maybe we'll stop the wars. Yes? Yes. That the difference between the center and the outside is just a strategy. It doesn't make us evil. So the conversation, when the conversation goes from out here to internally, the needs, the universal needs, then the wars will stop. And we can begin to have a conversation that is connecting, that brings more empathy and compassion and understanding. Brene Brown shared in one of her talks that I listened to, one of the things she loves about church is singing songs with strangers. And last month, I was out visiting my grandkids in Washington, and it was the first time my son and his wife let me take the kids to church. It was a holy moment. Now, we didn't go to a unit church. It didn't matter to me. But when we got back, I asked little Bianca, who's 3, what did you love about church? She said, singing. I loved the singing. And I found out as I continued our conversation that she rarely sings with adults. And I remember in that church service, she kept staring at me while I was singing. She's like, wow, what's happening? So if we begin to focus our attention on those holy moments, yes, where we are connected, to sing with strangers. Not all of us in this room know each other, right? Right? Right. That we are here, we're not complete strangers, but we don't know each other completely. But how wonderful it is, to let go of our fear to come back to ourselves. So we're sort of, moving in. So there's this affirmation I thought we would do together. Are you willing? Yes. Okay, let's look at it. Let's see. It's here. Okay, good. It's magical how that happens, right? I just ask and it appears. So let's say this together, okay? Immersed in a field of courage and bravery, I am willing to see and be seen. My world is made new as I live freely, love abundantly, and expand mindfully. Yes? Yes? So the last thing I want to read to you is just so wonderful, and I just want your soul to be ready to hear it. Now, if you'd like to close your eyes, because I might get a little boisterous, and just receive this soul to soul, okay? Okay, so this is about the universe gently placing her hands upon your shoulders, pulling you close, and whispering in your ear, okay? I'm not screwing around. It's time. All this pretending and performing, all these coping mechanisms that you've developed to protect yourself from feeling inadequate and getting hurt has to go. Your armor is preventing you from growing into your gifts. I understand that you needed these protections when you were small. I understand that you believed your armor could help you secure all of the things you needed to feel worthy of love and belonging. But you're still searching, and you're more lost than ever. Time is growing short. There are unexplored adventures ahead of you. You can't live the rest of your life worried about what other people think. You were born worthy of love and belonging. Courage and daring are coursing through you. You were made to live and love your whole heart. It's time to show up and be seen. Yes? Yes. Let's pray. Precious Spirit, we are so ready to show up and be seen. We are so ready to be part of a universal world that supports love, compassion, empathy, understanding. A world that allows us to share our gifts abundantly. A world that is supportive and cooperative. A world that works for everyone. Thank you, God, for guiding us to these universal teachings. For this holy moment, we are ready, and so it is. Amen. Thank you. God bless.